Hey guys, Sean here at the Gardener Center. So this week I have two timely mid-October topics to talk to you guys about. These have both been inspired by questions I've received during the past week or two. And actually one of them has been a question I've been getting asked at this time of year for the past 30 years. So first I'm going to talk about why are my evergreens dying, and spoiler alert, they're not. What's going on with them is perfectly normal, and I'm going to get into that and tell you why. And then the other question has to do with something that's going to be real relevant real soon. If you have dahlias at home, or caladiums at home, or elephant ears at home, cannas, you know, those tropical bulbs that you can keep from year to year, we're getting real close to time to be pulling those out of the ground and keeping them till next year. So I'm going to tell you how to have the most success with that, so please stay tuned. All right guys, so the first thing I'm going to talk about are these evergreens that may appear to be dying or in distress in the middle of October. They're not. I'm going to talk a little bit about what evergreens are first, and then I'm going to explain to you what's happening, and then you guys won't have to worry about that anymore every year in the middle of October. So when we talk about evergreens, there's two distinct kinds. There is a broad-leaved evergreen, which you see here. This is an Inkberry Holly. So broad-leaved evergreens have an actual leaf, like in a traditional leaf shape. So think about hollies, think about boxwoods, think about azaleas, rhododendrons, mountain laurels. They all qualify as broad-leaved evergreens. And then over here, I have a couple examples of conifers or needle-leafed evergreens. So this is an Alberta spruce here. And then over here, this is a fern spray cypress. So both conifers here. So that's the main difference between them. Every year in the middle of October, and sometimes in the spring, so sometimes these guys do the same thing in the springtime. I'm going to talk about that too. So the name evergreen, it kind of implies that a plant keeps its leaves forever, and that's actually not the case. What evergreen means is that the plant keeps most of its leaves throughout the entire year. There's no evergreen on the planet that literally keeps its leaves forever. So what we see in October on a lot of the broad-leaved and needle-leaved conifer evergreens here is an annual leaf drop. Just like our deciduous trees are starting to color up and lose their leaves now, the same thing happens with a lot of evergreens in the fall. So like you can see here, over here on my cypress, this is a really, really good example right here of all this yellowing and brown on the interior. And you know, especially if you guys are like new homeowners, maybe you're one of the many people who recently just moved here from the city and you actually have a landscape and a yard with plants in it for the first time, you may be seeing this going on in your yard and saying, oh, this tree looks like it's been here for 20 years, but now I'm killing it. I got to figure out what's going on. You're not. This is a normal thing, and if you look, you can see exactly what's happening. They don't keep their leaves forever, so every year in the fall, they will either lose their 1 or 2 year old needles, which logically would be behind the newest growth, because the newest growth is from this year or the year before, and the 1 or 2 year old needles are going to be behind. That's exactly what you're seeing here happening on the cypress. And then you'll see the same thing on the broadleafed evergreen holly here. All this nice green growth on the top. All these yellow leaves, which you could literally see dropping on the bottom there. And that's a normal event every fall. It's just the plant shedding its oldest foliage, which is absolutely normal. It's not sick, it doesn't need food. It's a normal annual event. Some hollies, this is an Inkberry holly. The other hollies, like the ones you think of like for Christmas time with the red berries, they actually lose their oldest leaves in the spring, just as new growth is emerging. So that's another time that people get alarmed. That also happens with azaleas. It also happens with rhododendrons and mountain laurels. You'll start seeing a lot of interior yelling and leaf drop in the springtime. Again, it's the same function. It's just happening at a different time of year. And it is perfectly normal, so there's absolutely no need to concern yourself with your white pines. We have some white pines that are here at the store that are doing exactly just this. We're going to share that with you. But there's absolutely no reason to be alarmed by any of that right now. And I hope that takes a little bit of that tension out of the situation for you. And I'm going to be right back to talk about some tender bulbs. All right, so you guys may recognize a few of the plants I have on the table over here. These guys in the front are caladiums. This guy here in the back is a colocasia, or elephant ears, what people most typically call these. And we sell these here as annuals in the spring. They sometimes tend to be a little pricey compared to the other annuals, and a lot of times you may want to keep them. And as you guys know, most of your annuals you can't keep from year to year, but these you can, because they're technically not an annual. We treat them that way, but they're technically a tender bulb. So they are a bulb that comes from tropical climates. So think about tulips, think about daffodils. It's just like that, only they come from warm places as opposed to cold. I've had a lot of people asking questions about how to keep them from year to year, and I have a new young employee here in the nursery here at the store who has also been hammering me with a lot of questions about just that, such as, well, why can I dig my caladium out of a pot and put it in the basement for the winter, but I can't do the same with my monstera? And you know, these are good questions, and it has to do with the fact that they're bulbs. And you know, in our climate, we think about bulbs. What are they? What do they do? Well, they grow actively in the spring and summer, and then they disappear for the winter. A lot of bulb plants. Think of like Asiatic or Oriental lilies. They behave very much that way. They're around in the spring and summer, and then they're gone in the cold months. When we get into bulbs from warm climates, their behavior as a bulb is not being dictated by temperature, but it's actually being dictated by wet and dry seasons, which you have occurring in tropical environments. So even though these caladiums and these colocasias are from South America where it's warm, they're going dormant not because of temperature, but dormant because of dryness. So that's basically what you're doing with them when you're storing them over the winter in your house. And that's why they take to that so well, is because you're just replicating that dry period in your home. So what I'm going to do first, I'm going to talk about these plants specifically, because there's two different groups. There's the guys you have to pull out of the ground before frost, and then there's the guys you have to leave in the ground until they get hit by the frost a couple of times. So caladiums and elephant ears, they come out before we get our killing frost. Now you guys definitely know by now from listening to me every week that our killing frost is about 2 weeks away. So during the next 2 weeks, you're going to want to think about getting your caladiums and your elephant ears out of the ground. If the caladiums are in pots, which is how most people use them, they can very easily be pulled from their pots. You want to shake the loose soil off of them, and then if you can find a spot in the yard or your garage where you can kind of lay them out on some cardboard, leave the foliage on, lay them out on some cardboard or some newspaper in a dry place where there's good air circulation, it's still warm. All the foliage is going to die back, and you're basically curing the bulbs. That's drying them. And if you've ever bought tulips or daffodils in a bag, they're dry. They're like onions, and you're going to be basically doing the same thing with these guys. Very important to let them dry out. And when you remove the soil from them after you take them out of the ground or out of their pots, you do not want to rinse the soil off. So the soil gets shaken off, and then they're allowed to, in a single layer, to dry in a shady spot that's cool with good air circulation. Let them do that for a couple of weeks, and then you can put them away for the winter. And ideally for the winter, they should be kept 50 to 60 degree temperatures. A lot of times a basement is perfect. If you have a heated garage that you don't keep too warm in the wintertime, that's a good spot for them too. Do not put them in plastic bags. Do not put them in jars. The ideal place for them is a cardboard box that you can fill up with a media for them to sit in. The two best things to use here is peat moss, and the other option would be this perlite here. If you're going to use peat moss, you want to make sure that it is dry. A lot of times if you buy peat moss at the nursery from outside, it might be wet from being outside. So if you're buying peat moss, buy it from inside the store where it's a dry product, because if you try to store your caladiums or your elephant ears in wet peat moss, they're going to rot over the winter time. So the dryness is key. And you know, you just get them in that cool place, 50, 60 degrees, basement, unheated garage, or minimally heated garage. And they're going to stay there until the end of April, beginning of May, when they're ready to get potted up again. Those are the pre-frost guys. The after-frost guys is a whole other group. So a big one are dahlias. A lot of people do dahlias, and you want to keep your dahlias and your cannas in the ground until after we've had several frosts. And after we've had a few killing frosts, you're going to know, because they're just going to turn into mush. And then after they turn to mush, you're going to want to cut them down to about 6 to 8 inches above the ground. Remove your stakes, your hoops, whatever you're using to support them over the season. And then you want to let them sit in the ground after we've had that couple of frosts for another 2 weeks. And then you're going to dig them up, and you're going to do the same thing you did with your caladiums and your elephant ears. Shake the loose soil off, let them cure in a single layer in that cool, dry place for a couple of weeks, and then get them into the peat moss or the perlite in a nice cardboard box with loosely close the flaps sort of thing, and then they're ready to go next year after they have a nice little rest over the winter time. Hope that took a little bit of the mystery out of the dying evergreens and what to do with these beautiful caladiums and elephant ears, dahlias, and cannas. Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week.